This is just going to be a short consideration for this week because when I look at the charts for that planetary dance moves going on this week, not a lot. However, this is the week of preparation. And I use that very specifically because beginning on Monday of next week, not tomorrow, this is Sunday, by the way, but on April 1st, April Fool's Day, Mercury is going to be going retrograde. That's why this is a preparation week to really pay attention to, because people get all kind of concerned about Mercury being retrograde, which it does 3 to 4 times a year for about 3 weeks each time. And it has a tendency, or it has the potential for muddling our effective use of our words to, really spell out what it is that we are attempting to spell out. And what the time before Mercury going retrograde is best utilized by getting ready for that 3-week dance where we're going to be doing Mercury retrograde. And this doesn't mean that life stops. For some people you would think that that's what they're thinking it is, because God, I just can't seem to get anything to go right at all in my life. I can't get the words to come out of my mouth appropriately, and it's not quite that kind of intensity for most of us. For some, yeah, maybe so. Anyway, what the preparation phase of getting ready for a Mercury retrograde to transpire is making sure that your ducks are in a row. You can still do things during Mercury retrograde as long as you're not trying to attempt to start things during a Mercury retrograde cycle. Like if you've been in the process of putting together, a sale or a purchase of a piece of property, just for instance, you've been investigating all kinds of things about this place that you want to buy or you want to sell. And when Mercury goes retrograde, the factors that can come into play are more along the lines of, making sure that you really, really have your, ducks in a row. What it is that you're actually heading for purchasing, and you've already investigated it very thoroughly. You just want to make sure that if you haven't signed the paperwork for this, that you read through it very, very thoroughly to make sure that you haven't overlooked something, because that is one of the things that can happen during a Mercury retrograde cycle. Or if you happen to be in a study program, you're in the process of, investigating something. And it's a good idea that before Mercury goes retrograde, that you have determined for those next 3 weeks, I want to look at this, whatever this happens to be. And in order to do that, I'm going to need some resources. So this week, the week before Mercury goes retrograde, get those resources, set aside or organized, or figure out where you're going to need to get them from. Make note, these are the resources that I will need. This is where I need to go to get them. Write it down, because this is one of those Mercury retrograde dance moves that can often come into play. It's like, wow, I'd like to do this, but, I haven't really organized as to how I'm going to pull that off. And Mercury goes retrograde. It's kind of like getting organized at that point. A lot more of a challenge to any of us to actually accomplish. That is the main aspect that's coming up. Let's just for giggles, let's look at the chart see what chart. This chart, by the way, that I have queued up right here is a chart for the full moon that's happening at 12 a.m. and 24 seconds here in Pacific Daylight Time in the Northwest Washington Olympic Peninsula where I live. So you can kind of see 5 degrees, 7 minutes of Aries. What does the Sabian symbol have to say about, of Libra? Aries is where the sun is. Doot, 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 doot. I got music playing in my head as usual. The Sabian symbol for that particular placement of the moon says, a man watches his ideals taking a concrete form before his inner vision. You know, this is kind of interesting to consider this, because in getting ready for our Mercury retrograde cycle, you know, a lot of that outer perspective vision that we might be having as to what we want to accomplish may not be as readily available for us as what our inner vision gives us insight into. Anyway, the keynote reads, the need to visualize clearly one's dreams or ideals in order to make them truly effectual. Keywords are interior formulation. So just keep that in mind, as you know, because one thing about eclipses is they're, you know, every eclipse is, and every new moon or full moon are times when you want to really make sure you're paying attention to the energy field within which you find yourself. And the reason I say that is because there are change factors on the move at either one of those processes, new moon or full moon. And eclipses have a tendency to, rather than just look at a month-long lunar cycle, you're looking at a lunar dance energy that stays highly active for a much longer period of time. And this is more so the case for those people that just happen to have, you know, something around those early degrees of Libra or Aries. And you could also say the early degrees of Capricorn and Cancer, which would be the square energy at play for this particular lunar eclipse factor. This is a south node lunar eclipse, which means that there are likely going to be energies that are coming at you from previous zones of time that are in play. It's not like it's something that is so totally new to you. It's, you know, I've been there before. This is early degrees of Libra, and so therefore, you know, is it going to have something to do with relationship? Oh, absolutely. You know, it is Libra after all. Any kind of partnership, actually, not just relationship, but, you know, the insight that is in play during this full moon in early Libra there is asking you to be sensitive about what it is that you actually engage other people in conversation about. And, you know, this is part of that preparation phase for Mercury going retrograde the next week. But as this week unfolds, you know, you're setting an energy profile within which you're going to do that Mercury retrograde dance, which is going to essentially be in Aries, you know, that realm of self. It's going to be like 27 degrees, I think, is where it goes retrograde. And then it goes back to, I'm not sure what, but maybe about 12 degrees or something like that. Oh, not quite that far. Goes back to 15 degrees and maybe 16 degrees. So it's if I look at, all the Mercury retrograde cycles for the year, this particular Mercury retrograde cycle, which I think I'm going to cover a little bit more next week. I'm not going to go into it now, but there's an intensity about this particular Mercury retrograde cycle that's coming up because it's the 3 weeks of retrograde and the compact version of the number of degrees that Mercury is actually going to move back to in the zodiac, which is 11 degrees. But some Mercury cycles will take you can go back 20 degrees. And anyway, it's in Aries, and we're in the Aries season. So during this dance that we're doing right now and getting ready for, there's going to be a lot of that, energy, that desire to be out there to create. And hopefully, we're in Aries now. We've planted the seeds of what it is we want to grow that we created during the last annual cycle of all the planetary dance around the zodiac, coming back to Aries again. And in Pisces, we had developed, if we were appropriately, considering the energies in play, what is it that the seeds of something new that we want to create are? And then we plant them in Aries. We're in Aries now, which doesn't mean that we're going to know what they are. It just means that we're giving them the opportunity to grow and sprout, to come up and say, hello, what is it that you require? So, the change factor of this lunar eclipse, and the eclipses transpire, essentially there are 2 or 3 eclipses in each eclipse cycle. And this particular one, we're looking at the first 2 are going to be this lunar eclipse. And then 2 weeks later, when the moon has basically gone all the way around to Aries, will be the new moon eclipse. And that'll be somewhere out here. We'll talk about that when it comes up. Anyway, the change factor. Stay grounded in what it is that particularly with Mercury retrograde coming up, stay grounded in, the words you share with one another as we go through this Mercury retrograde cycle. There's a large factor of change in play that has to do with how we feel. That is the moon, after all. And how do we feel about how we interact with one another has been pushed, or is being pushed, into this realm of, the interaction space. And that's, honesty. I think it's probably a good quality to have with ourselves, is that, yes, your tongue can get tied in your conversations, but admit it when it happens. Don't try and come up with an excuse as to why that slipped out the way it did. That could be a appropriate, very appropriate, in fact, moment in which growth and learning actually put in an appearance for us that can be very, very helpful in going forward honestly with what it is that we need to do. Was it a faux pas? Was it a Freudian slip? Yeah, these are possibilities. And this particular lunar eclipse beginning here in Libra, is asking us quite specifically to pay attention to what kind of energy is transpiring between you and me, you and me and any other that right now says, pay attention. There are changes afoot, and we're going to grow from it if we can be honest with one another in this growth spurt. And, when I look at the aspects that are showing up here on the chart, we have this aspect which is, in a way, it's kind of waxing and waning both. Venus has basically done this sextile with Jupiter at the end of last week, and it's approaching the sextile to Uranus. And these two planets, Jupiter and Uranus, they're working on a conjunction, coming together to ask us some very unique things that a lot of astrologers are talking about these days. I'm not going to get into it yet. It doesn't happen actually, the physical conjoining of these two until April. April 20th or 21st, something like that, next month, when they actually are at the very same degree, which is 21 degrees. So you see, Uranus is not going to go very far. Another degree, another half a degree. And Jupiter is going to just keep sliding along saying, are you thinking large enough about this possibility of what can be awakening you? I don't want to get too carried away with that right now. Anyway, the aspects for the week are, let's get this thing back to, we're still in hours. We're going to go ahead till our 8 o'clock on Monday morning. Switch it back to days. Oh, I love these tools. Another factor that's going to be taking place this week is the not till we get till the weekend, I think, or Friday or something like that. You can kind of see the moon moves like 12 to 13 degrees a day. I'm just jumping ahead through the week real quick. And here, we're almost at the end of Scorpio with the moon right now. And if we go look at our declinations, you can kind of see declination here. This is a movement up and down of planets, north and south. The moon is right now at 23 degrees south, 2 minutes. And on this day, because it's moving relatively rapidly, it's going to go out of bounds it'll be out of bounds until the 3rd of April. So it's going to be out of bounds as we step across the line into that Mercury retrograde dance on April Fool's Day. Ought to be highly entertaining. Mercury, after all, can be the trickster. So keep your wits about you as you get into the beginning of next week, knowing that the moon being out of bounds will likely spin some uniquely creative opportunities for you to not be caught off guard by the trickster, who will be prime for playtime. Anyway, that's all I got for this week. That celestial dance, I don't have anything more to say about that, so I'm just going to let that be the energy to live into this week. Get prepared for Mercury going retrograde. Be aware that the eclipse cycle that we're in right now is asking us to really, pay attention to the change energy that's afoot, and it's across that Libra Aries axis, the process of what does it mean to be a self, and in that discovery of who I am, how much do I want to share my energy with the other, to compare notes, and am I willing to change in that dance? That's all I got for this week.